In some of these videos I've been thinking about science, and I've been talking about science, and I've particularly been talking about and interested in science as a kind of poetics. And the qualifier I always give on that is not that I think science is a kind of social construction or relativistic necessarily. I think there is, I think empirical knowledge has a particular status, but I think the construction, manifestation, expression, transfer of that knowledge relies upon poetic strategies, really. I think science is a particular genre of poetry and scientific knowing, not just scientific writing, although that's certainly true, but scientific knowing is a particular genre of poetic cognition. Even though it doesn't appear as such, I think it has the same quality, I think, that prose writing has, as opposed to, not prose writing, but certain kinds of plain language writing has, in contradistinction to literary or poetic writing. And that's something that Stanley Fish talks about when he explores this idea that there's a big distinction between poetic writing and non-poetic writing, plain speaking type writing, and makes the point that that's a legitimate distinction. I think the same is true. Well, what Stanley Fish is saying, that that all writing is poetic, but plain writing has this, the writing that appears to be plain is a particular genre of poetic writing which conveys this particular image, and it's something that Ranciere talks about as well when he talks about the poetics of knowledge. But I think the same is true not just in terms of writing and expression, but in terms of cognition itself. What I'm interested in there is the point at which the kind of poetics breaks through, or the point at which the strategies by which the genre of poetics that we call scientific knowledge kind of bleeds into other kinds of poetry, other genres of knowledge, other genres of expression. Perhaps knowledge is the wrong word, but the poetry becomes evident. And I think for me those occur at the boundaries, and here I'm using a spatial metaphor or a territorial metaphor, at the boundaries of scientific knowing. And I think scientific knowing has a number of boundaries, and I'm going to try and map them all at some point. But certainly there are kind of temporal boundaries. There was a kind of moment in history, or a series of moments in history, when scientific practice kind of geared up and established itself as a genre. And here I'm thinking about the work of Francis Bacon and Roger Bacon, indeed, which was referred to, and people like Newton and that gang, really, in the 16th, 17th centuries. They began to formulate that process and identify what the genre of scientific thought might be. So there's certainly a temporal boundary which marks the beginning, I think, and there's probably one which we're in, which is constantly moving forward, the front end of that temporal boundary, if you like, which has a different set of properties. But there are also other boundaries. There are boundaries between conventional science and pseudoscience. I think fringe science and frontier science. I think anybody who's in the fringes of science would like to be on the frontiers for reasons which I'll have to think about. And there's lots of areas in which science seems to be in some kind of dialogue with other practices, sometimes favourable dialogue, sometimes quite antagonistic. But I think at those moments poetry asserts itself. And I think that's, as I say, I think that's the case for all the boundaries of science, that there are points which as I say, the poetic genre which marks scientific discourse. And I think I've spoken elsewhere what kind of tropes that genre is marked by. When that breaks down, other kinds of poetics assert themselves and become self-evident.